Right, hi, welcome to Bite Size Interviews. Today I've got Janet O'Kane. Janet originally comes from Dorset, but over the years she gradually moved north with her work and now lives in the Scottish Borders, which is about 50 miles south of Edinburgh. She spent much of her life working for Boots, doing stock control and marketing of products as diverse as typewriters, toys, and nappies. She's always been a devoted reader of crime fiction and once got told off by Ian Rankin at an event in Edinburgh for asking him too many questions. One Guy Fawkes night a few years ago, she pointed out to her husband John that the village bonfire they were watching burn would make a great hiding place for a dead body. And he said, "Go on then, write it." That challenge led to No Stranger to Death, which Janet self-published in late 2013. The sequel, Too Soon a Death, is due out this summer. Janet, you write crime fiction and your protagonist is Dr. Zoe Morland. It's an unusual choice having a GP as a protagonist. What led to that decision?
Well, I've always known GPs as people rather than just the doctor over the desk. And when I was growing up, our next door neighbours were a pair of GPs, husband and wife, and they took pity on this poor little only child who got bored a lot. And I can remember being allowed to go into their dispensary and help them count pills and put them into bottles. And they used to take me out for rides in their car when they used to visit their patients because it was a very rural practice. So I knew that I had a lot of respect for GPs anyway. And then fast forward a few decades, and I'm living in the Scottish Borders, and I get a job actually working at a GP practice over in Galashiels, which is one of the bigger towns in the Borders. It was only short term, it was doing maternity leave cover for the practice administrator. But I really enjoyed it, and I saw such a different side to the world because you get everybody goes to their doctor, rich or poor, whatever they, old or young, whatever they do, they go to their doctor. We're lucky in this country that we can go to our GPs at the drop of a hat. Um, but GPs don't just deal with coughs and colds, they actually help us with really big events in our lives, death, divorce, etc. And we trust them and we tell them things that we'd never tell anybody else. And we know that they are bound by confidentiality. And so there's a lot of trust there. And so I wanted a main character that people would trust. And also, to be honest, I'm surprised that nobody had done it before, because GPs not only are saying that they see people in extremis, they deal with all sorts of events, but they also come into contact with the police and other emergency services. And the concept of confidentiality is really fascinating. I thought, because what would you do if you thought that one of your patients was involved with a crime? What could you do? And so I took it from there really. And it's turned out the readers really like that.
Interesting
They enjoy a
question.
different. Hmm?
Interesting question. What would you do if you found out one
Well,
of your
well,
patients
exactly,
was?
because it really confidentiality is absolutely paramount, and so that's it. It's like a priest, really, and that's all there is to it. And so I could see all sorts of potential for. I mean, after all, crime fiction is about secrets, really. People have secrets, and that's why they do bad things normally to stop other people from knowing their secrets. And as I say, readers seem to like it. Funnily enough, though, a few years ago, I entered an early draft of No Stranger to Death into a competition, and I was a runner-up. And my prize was to have the first few chapters assessed by an established crime writer and reviewer, who will remain nameless. And she was quite complimentary about my writing, but the big thing she said was that I really ought to consider making Zoe a police officer. And that was so much not what I wanted to write. So I thought, no, I'm going to stick with it, and I'm glad I did now.
Yeah. How did you go about researching her being a GP?
Well, I think because of my experience at the health centre, I already knew quite a lot about the dynamics of the day-to-day running of a health centre, what happens there. But some of it was a bit out of date because I knew from going to my doctor that now, instead of these huge piles of manila folders with our records in, it's all on screen. Um, and so I'm lucky enough to have a lady GP, and Zoe's not based on her at all. But I asked her whether she would answer a few questions, and she very kindly said yes. And we met for coffee, and she answered my questions and gave me a lot of extra information, especially about what it's like being a woman in general practice. That was quite an eye opener.
Did you find that you'd got enough scope for Zoe to be involved in the crime investigation during or following the murder at the bonfire?
Well, that was a challenge. When I started writing, I mean, this is my first book. I'd never written long fiction before, so I had no idea really what I was supposed to do and the challenges I would come up against, and it was a big issue. Um, and so I had to find my way around it. First of all, I had to um, admit to myself that she wouldn't know everything that was going on, and so I had to make the story interesting without all the procedural detail. But as you say, she also has to know a certain amount of what's going on, and that's where Kate Mackenzie, Zoe's friend, comes in. I created her character because she's a good sounding board for Zoe, but also I made her the old flame of DCI Erskine Mather, who's the senior investigating officer on the case. And it turns out that actually Mather really wants to rekindle their relationship. So he pops up every now and again, and the two women keep on asking him questions, and he keeps on trying not to answer, but they manage to suss out a few things anyway. And also, Kate is a borderer. She's born and bred in the borders. She knows everybody knows her, and her mother has a very effective grapevine, which in the borders is the way things operate. And so that was helpful too.
So, do you intend to run this as a series with Zoe Morland? And if so, do you think you've got the scope?
Well, when I started writing No Stranger to Death, it was going to be a standalone, but I got about two-thirds of the way through and realised that there was a lot more story to be told about Zoe, and so I'm now writing a sequel which will be out in the summer. And that opens with the discovery of a young lad's body on the banks of the River Tweed. And Zoe's called out to identify him because the only thing that they can find on him is a scrap of paper with her GP practice address and telephone number on it. So they assume that he's a patient, but he isn't. She's never seen him before, but needless to say, her involvement doesn't end there. Um, as for being a series, I don't think it will be. No, I think I'm going to stop at the second book.
Right, okay. Um, there's always discussions online about books fitting into neat labelled shelves in bookstores, and that books that don't fit into these labels aren't picked up. How do you define No Stranger to Death for a labelled shelf?
Well, it isn't easy to label, I think, which is possibly why, although the agents that I approached, most of them were very complimentary about my writing, they didn't want to take it on. They didn't think they could sell it um, because of its rural setting and its amateur sleuth main character. Amateur sleuth, I hate that expression, but anyway, um, it sounds like a cozy, but also it's got some quite dark bits in it, and it deals with what's called adult
Yeah.
themes. So it's not really a cozy either. The best thing that I've seen describing it is a review which said it was a cozy with bite, and I'm quite happy with that.
And what has feedback been like for No Stranger to Death?
It's been brilliant. I mean, I've got nearly all five-star reviews on Amazon, which is fantastic. And I was number 14 in the top 20 of the most borrowed books in the Scottish Borders libraries last summer,
Brilliant.
which I was really chuffed about too. But really, the best part is actually direct contact with readers who tell you how much they enjoy your book. So through Facebook and Twitter, but also face to face. I was in the bank and there was a teller behind the glass who I'd never met before, which is quite unusual in the borders because we know everybody.
Mm.
And I put my card in the machine, and she called up my account details, and then she looked up at me and she said, "Are you the Janet O'Kane who wrote the book I'm enjoying now?" And I said, "Well, yes." And that was just brilliant. And I volunteer in a local charity shop one day a week. And a lady came in there and rushed up to me and said, "I really enjoyed your book, but you've really got to promise me that Maeva and Kate get together in the second one, or I'll never forgive you." And so the people that only exist in my head actually now exist in other people's heads.
And that's a
And,
good
and
feeling.
I just love that.
Yeah.
And that's the most rewarding part of it to me.
So to round it up, the fact that you have an unusual protagonist, it can still work.
I like to think so.
It has. All right. Thank you very much, Janet. It's been great having you.
It's been great speaking to you, Rebecca. Thank you.